Hey there, I'm Benjamin from Loves Data. In this video, I'm going to show you how to track button clicks in Google Analytics 4 with the help of Google Tag Manager. The technique I'm going to share is the quickest and easiest way I've found to track buttons. I hope you like it. To track buttons, we're going to use Google Tag Manager. So if you're not using GTM yet, I've included a link to my tutorial series in the description below this video. And if you run into any issues as you're following along, please let me know in the comments. Okay, let's head to Google Tag Manager. To track button clicks in Google Analytics 4, we will need to create a tag and trigger. The trickiest step will be to configure the trigger to only fire our tag for the specific button or buttons we want to track. So we're going to use another trigger along with some variables to help us identify the best way to track the button. This should make it easier to get up and running quickly. To do this, let's navigate to Triggers. And let's create a new trigger. Let's name the trigger All Elements. Now let's select Trigger Configuration. And let's select All Elements. This trigger will fire every time we click something on our website, so it's going to help us identify how to track our button. Now let's save the trigger. Next, we need to navigate to Variables. And let's select Configure at the top. This lets us enable and disable the built-in variables. If you're just getting started with GTM, the built-in variables allow you to use different pieces of information that are available on your website. For example, the page URL variable lets you use the full URL someone has loaded on your website. Now I want you to look for clicks, and I want you to enable all of the built-in click variables. These will allow us to see details about the elements we click on our website. I also want you to go ahead and enable all of the built-in variables under Forms. This is because buttons can be contained inside forms on your website. By enabling the click and form variables, it makes it easier to identify the best way to track our buttons. Once we've identified how we'll track our button, we can come back here and disable any of the built-in variables we're not using. Okay, now let's close this. And let's click Preview. We enter the URL of our website. And click Connect. Our website loads. Next, we need to find the button we want to track. On my demo website, I want to track when people click on the search button, so let's scroll down. And let's click the button. Now let's open Tag Assistant. On the left, we need to look for the click event. Let's select this. Now let's select the Variables tab. This shows us the values for all of the variables we've enabled in GTM. We can see our click variables. And further down, we can see our form variables. If you're tracking a button contained in a form, then you might want to use one of the form variables. Or if you want to track a button that's not contained in a form, you might want to use one of the click variables. The main thing you need to look for is something unique about the button you want to track. For example, if you just see Submit, then this is likely to be used for multiple buttons on your website. So using something like that might mean you're tracking additional button clicks. For my button, we can see the form classes has a value of search-submit. Since it includes search and submit, this is likely to only be used for the search button, so let's copy this. And we will also need to remember that we'll be using form classes. Now let's head back to GTM. We're still looking at the variables, so while we're here, let's disable the built-in variables that we won't be using. To do this, let's select Configure. And let's disable the variables we enabled but aren't going to use. We just need to leave form classes enabled. Now let's close this. And let's navigate to Triggers. We're going to edit the All Elements trigger we created to only track clicks on our button. To do this, let's select the trigger. Let's rename the trigger Click Button Search. And let's select Trigger Configuration. Now let's select Some Clicks. And let's select Form Classes from the drop-down. Remember, this is the built-in variable we use to identify the button on our website. Now let's change Contains to Equals. You might need to change this for your button. For example, if you found multiple values included in form classes or the variable you're going to use, then you might want to leave Contains. So you might need to use something slightly different for your trigger. Okay, now let's paste the value we copied from Tag Assistant. This was search-submit for my example. Now let's click Save. We've now created our trigger, so the final step is to create our tag. To do this, let's navigate to Tags. We can see there is already a Google tag that's sending data to Google Analytics. If you're getting started with GTM, then you might not have this yet. So again, I recommend watching my GTM tutorial series if you're just getting started. The link is in the description below this video. Now let's click New. I'm going to name the tag Google Analytics GA4 Search Button. And let's select Tag Configuration. Choose Google Analytics. And select Google Analytics GA4 Event as the tag type. Now I'm going to select my measurement ID variable. I'm going to name the event click_button_search. You can name your event anything you like. However, I suggest following Google's recommended naming convention when tracking events into Google Analytics. To learn more about events and how to name them, I've included a link in the extra resources below this video. I'm also going to limit the number of times this tag is fired. To do this, let's select Advanced Settings. And under Tag Firing Options, let's change once per event to once per page. You don't need to do this for your tag if you don't want to, but what this does is it means the button will only be tracked once per page. So if people manage to click the button multiple times on the page, it will only be counted once in our reports. Okay, now let's select Triggering. And let's choose the trigger we just created. Now let's save our tag. And let's click Preview to test our changes. Our website loads. Now let's scroll down and click the button. And now let's open Tag Assistant. We can see our button tracking tag has fired. And let's select the Google Analytics Measurement ID at the top. We can see our Click Button Search event has been sent to Google Analytics. We can select this. And this shows us all of the information, called parameters, which are automatically sent with our custom event. When you're happy your buttons are being tracked correctly, you can publish your container. To do this, let's head back to GTM. And let's click Submit. Name our version. And click Publish. Moving forward, you will be tracking your custom event into Google Analytics. You'll need to wait a day before data is available in your reports, but since I've already tested this out on my demo website, let's head to Google Analytics to take a look at how we can report on our button clicks. Let's navigate to Reports and select Engagement, and then Events. You'll see your custom event in this report. And for even more flexibility, you can create an exploration report to combine your event with other available dimensions. You'll now be able to report on the number of times people click the button in Google Analytics. You can also use this method to send data to other platforms. For example, you could use the same trigger with a Google Ads conversion tag to track button clicks into Google Ads. Are you going to track buttons using GTM? I'd love to know. Let me know in the comments below. And to learn even more about Google Analytics and GTM, please take a moment to check out my courses. I've included a link in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.